And so, there's a lot of new things that she's dealing with at such a young age as well. And she's been in Spain for many years, since I think she was 13 years old. I think she moved to Spain and trained at Rafa's Academy, and has been, around people with a mindset that demands a lot, but is also very focused on, you have to put in the work, you're respectful, and she's been around that environment, and I think there's no coincidence that she has the results that she has. But I think it's going to be very important for her to be a little bit protected from the craziness that comes with that all as well, and just the ability to keep focusing on what she has to do.
A four-time Grand Slam champion just sat down and compared Alex Eala's life to Michael Jordan's. Not her tennis, her life, the pressure, the fame, the weight of being a national icon at 20 years old. Kim Clijsters did not hold back a single word. And what she said about Eala's future will genuinely surprise you. Do you think Alex Eala is being protected enough from the intense pressure that comes with being the Philippines' biggest sports star right now, or is the system failing her? Drop your honest take in the comments. Let's start with the comparison itself, because it is the kind of thing that makes you stop scrolling and actually pay attention.
Again, like when it comes down to the on-court stuff, she reminds me a little bit of a, like she has that kind of pit bull. Like I remember Sibylkova was a little bit like that to me as well. Like they have such quick feet, but the ability to, from a defensive situation, still move into the court and become an aggressive player is a very tough combination to handle on the other side of the net. So very interesting. Has done great things so far at a young age, but still has some improvements to get to, and the consistency is something that is going to be very important. A lot of players know her now, know her strengths, know her weaknesses. So that's something that she's going to have to deal with as well.
Kim Clijsters, a four-time Grand Slam champion, a former world #1 and one of the most respected voices in the history of women's tennis, was on the Love All podcast with Blair Henley. And she said this about Alex Eala: that Eala has to deal with the life of being like Michael Jordan in the Philippines. Not like a top 10 tennis player, not like a rising WTA star, like Michael Jordan, the most iconic basketball player in history, the global standard bearer for what it means to be so famous in your home country that normal life becomes essentially impossible.
It's online and it's in the news and everything, but it's not easy to, I think, to deal with changes like that so quickly.
That comparison did not come from a casual fan or a social media account looking for engagement. It came from someone who competed at the absolute highest level of tennis for over a decade, who understands what elite athletic pressure feels like from the inside, and who has been watching Eala's rise with the specific eye of someone who has been in those same stadiums and felt those same crowds. When Clijsters says Eala needs to be protected, she is not being dramatic. She is being precise. And the story behind that assessment is worth understanding fully. Eala was ranked world number 137 a year ago. Today she is world number 31. That jump from 137 to 31 in roughly 12 months is one of the most dramatic ranking climbs in recent WTA history. And it came with everything attached to it simultaneously. The better seedings, the harder opponents, the bigger courts, the larger stadiums, the media attention, the sponsor relationships, the Nike Global Ambassador status, the front row seats at fashion weeks, and most significantly, the weight of representing an entire nation of over 110 million people who have been waiting for a player like her for decades. All of that arrived at once, not gradually, not with a slow adjustment period where she could get used to each new layer of attention before the next one arrived. It all came together in a compressed timeline that would overwhelm most adults in any profession, let alone a 20-year-old who is simultaneously trying to compete against the best tennis players in the world. Clijsters recognized this and named it specifically. People think being famous is just online and in the news. Clijsters said exactly that, but it is not. When you are the equivalent of Michael Jordan in your home country, the practical implications of that status touch everything. You cannot go to the grocery store. You cannot walk down the street without being recognized. You cannot have a meal in public without attracting attention. Eala herself mentioned in a recent interview that she tries to avoid going out alone now when she is in the Philippines. She framed it with gratitude, calling it a blessing. But the underlying reality is that her ability to move through the world as a private person is essentially gone at 20 years old before winning a Grand Slam before cracking the top 10. The The level of cultural saturation she has achieved in the Philippines is something most athletes never experience regardless of how successful they become, because it requires a very specific combination of factors. A nation with a deep emotional investment in sports success on the global stage. A player who carries that nation's flag in a sport it had no previous representation in at the highest level, and a personality and playing style that translates across the lines of sports fan and casual observer simultaneously. Eala has all three, and Clijsters is saying loudly and clearly that the tennis world needs to understand the magnitude of what that means for a young player and take it seriously. Now let's talk about what Clijsters actually said about the tennis itself, because her analysis is as sharp as the comparison was striking, and it deserves the same level of attention. She started by saying Eala makes her opponents feel very uncomfortable. That is a specific and meaningful observation from someone who spent years on the other side of the net against the best players in the world. Uncomfortable is not the same as good. Uncomfortable means the opponent cannot find their rhythm. Uncomfortable means the pattern of play they prepared for keeps getting disrupted. Uncomfortable means every time they think they have figured something out, the player across the net does something unexpected. Left-handedness is part of it. Clijsters pointed this out directly, noting that Eala's left-handedness is something she cannot control, but that it creates real tactical problems for opponents. Right-handed players spend the vast majority of their practice and match time dealing with the angles, spins, and shot shapes that right-handers produce. When a left-hander stands across the net, the geometry changes in ways that even experienced professionals have to consciously adjust to. The serve kicks differently. The forehand creates angles to the left-handed player's strength side that correspond to the opponent's weaker side. The entire baseline exchange feels different. But beyond the left-handedness, Clijsters identified something more interesting about Eala's technical game. She said Eala's backhand is actually better than her forehand, and she specifically described it as an aggressive shot rather than a defensive one. In women's tennis, backhand quality at the top level is often the defining factor in extended baseline exchanges. When I can hurt you with her backhand, not just keep the ball in play, but actually create pressure and put you on the defensive from her backhand side, that is a significant tactical weapon that opponents cannot simply avoid by going to one side of the court. She also described the combination that makes Eala's game genuinely difficult to decode. Aggressive baseline play on the backhand creates deep balls that push the opponent behind the baseline. Then the forehand angle opens the court to the opponent's weaker side. The rhythm breaks. The opponent is defending instead of attacking. And Eala, who Clijsters noted has excellent footwork and stamina, can sustain that pressure over long rallies in ways that physically wear down opponents who thought they could outgrind her. The pitbull mentality comparison is the piece that explains the Miami run more than any other single observation. Clijsters compared her to Dominika Tibikova, a player she described as having quick feet combined with the ability to transition from a defensive position into aggression suddenly and without warning. From a defensive position to moving into the court and becoming aggressive. That transition is genuinely difficult to handle on the other side of the net because it disrupts the natural rhythm of a point at a moment when the opponent expects to be pressing their advantage. In Miami, Eala came through qualifying. She was not supposed to be there at that level, and she beat then the world number one. She beat Jelena Ostapenko. She beat Madison Keys playing essentially at home in the United States. She reached the semifinals, and the pitbull description explains how she did not beat those players by being better than them in every technical dimension. She beat them by competing in a way that made them uncomfortable, disrupted their patterns, and refused to stay in the defensive position long enough for them to build momentum. Clijsters also addressed the crowd dynamic specifically because it is something that has defined Eala's 2026 season so far in a way that is unprecedented at her ranking level. Every tournament she enters, the Filipino fans show up in massive numbers. Dubai was standing room only. Melbourne generated attendance records. Abu Dhabi, Auckland. The pattern is consistent and growing. She sells out buildings as a top 30 player in ways that established top 5 players do not always manage. Clijsters talked about crowd energy from her own experience with a nuance that is genuinely interesting. She said the pressure she felt in matches almost never came from the crowd itself. It came from her team, her trainer who left his family to help her, her coaches. She wanted to win for them as much as for herself. And representing Belgium in team competition like the Fed Cup hurt more when she lost than any individual tournament because it was about her teammates, not just herself. But she also described the energizing effect of a connected crowd in ways that are directly relevant to understanding what Aya has been experiencing. At the US Open, during night sessions, The crowd is close and loud. She could make eye contact with fans. They would shout encouragement. And when she delivered, those small moments of connection gave her energy that carried into the next point. She said crowd energy could actually help when she felt flat or unfocused, providing a kind of external reset that brought her back into the moment. Eala plays in front of that kind of crowd every single match right now. Thousands of Filipino fans who traveled specifically to see her, who know her story, who are emotionally invested in every point she plays. That energy is available to her as a resource in ways that most players at her ranking level simply do not have access to. The crowd at a top 30 players match is typically politely engaged. The crowd at an EA match is participating. But Clijsters is also right that this creates a complication. After Eala's close 3-set loss to Alicia Parks at the Australian Open, some fans reacted negatively in ways that crossed reasonable lines. Rafael Nadal, whose academy trained Eala from the age of 13, publicly addressed the situation and defended her. Clijsters referenced this moment directly as an example of the new things Eala is dealing with at such a young age. The intensity of the fan base that is Eala's greatest asset is also a source of pressure that needs to be managed carefully. Fans who are passionately invested can shift from supporting to demanding in ways that are genuinely damaging to a young athlete's mental development. Clijsters said it needs to be important for Eala to be protected from the craziness that comes with all of this and to stay focused on what she needs to do. That protection is not just a nice sentiment. It is a tactical necessity for Eala's long-term development. The tennis is clearly at a level where the results are already extraordinary. She went from 137 to 31 in a year. She beat the world number 1. She is being called the biggest draw in women's tennis by former top 10 players. Coco Gauff, a 2-time Grand Slam champion, praised her after beating her in Dubai. She is now a Nike Global Ambassador with her portrait on the wall at their world headquarters in Oregon. The foundation is there, the talent is there, the mindset, which Clijsters described as showing clear mental growth even at this young age, is developing in the right direction. The Rafa Nadal Academy gave her 7 years of training in an environment that demands hard work, focus, and respect. Clijsters specifically said she does not think it is a coincidence that Eala is getting the results she is. But sustaining this trajectory and actually reaching the Grand Slam level that everyone around her is now projecting requires navigating the Michael Jordan comparisons, the sold-out stadiums, the fan criticism after losses, the media attention, the commercial demands, and the weight of national expectation in a way that does not consume the core of what makes her competitive on the tennis court. Clijsters has lived at the top of women's tennis. She knows what that management looks like, and she is saying publicly that Eala deserves the kind of protection and support structure that true global superstars require, not because she is fragile, because the demands on her are genuinely extraordinary and the people around her need to take that seriously. Indian Wells starts March 4th. Miami follows March 17th. The biggest tests of Eala's career in the tournaments where everything can change again are right around the corner, and the question of whether she gets there as a protected, well-supported athlete or as someone overwhelmed by everything surrounding the tennis will shape what actually happens on the court. Kim Clijsters has seen enough to know the difference, and she is making sure everyone paying attention understands the stakes. Kim Clijsters just told the tennis world something it needed to hear. Alex Eala is not just a rising star. She is a 20-year-old carrying the weight of an entire nation while competing against the best players in the world. The journey ahead is extraordinary. If you are locked in on this story, hit that like button and subscribe right